So we need to do sound check for Cline. No, it's pretty good.
I think it's good. Testing, test.
3-4 inches away from the microphone, more or less.
Okay.
Cline Glidden, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. Cline, you're a counsel at Ogier. You started there as an article clerk about 10 years ago. Former Minister of Tourism for the Cayman Islands government, which is really, really interesting. And it also says here, a rising star in the legal 500 Caribbean.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how I got that, Mike.
Yeah, somebody said something nice about you. You must have done something right at some point.
Somewhere along the way, someone found something that I found.
Yeah, exactly. Cline, tell us a little bit, what's your day-to-day, what's your area of expertise at Ogier?
Thanks, Mike. So Ogier is a full-service law firm, mainly financial services, as most of the larger firms in the island are. Mm-hmm. The unique aspect of Ogier is that we've also developed quite a significant local legal services practice. So you get the international reputation and reputation of having a international branded law firm, one of the larger ones on the island, but also having local legal services. Most of the other larger firms concentrate mainly on financial services. Obviously, Cayman is seen as a leader in international finance. And so for whatever reason, most of them don't actually have, the larger firms don't actually have a local legal service offering. I get to actually lead that practice. And, it comprises of real estate relocation aspects of it as well, immigration,
residency, right?
Residency, licensing, company incorporation. As we get clients who come down and look at purchasing real estate, they're going to more than likely have companies that they want to bring to Cayman. In many cases, the high net worth individuals actually have various assets, whether it's aircraft, yachts, that also they want to then be registered in Cayman. So it kind of broadens from that residence aspect. So there's the licensing requirements. Some of them want to get involved in local businesses as well, local investments. And so we do the full range of relocation. We look at it as a concierge relocation service.
Yeah, absolutely. But you have to. You can't just be one element, because then you're almost doing a disservice to your client by not being up to speed or able to service their other needs that they may not necessarily know they need to have, right? They need to know about immigration and kids turning 18 and investments and trusts as well, right?
Trust,
corporates,
estate planning, and like I said, we're happy to and able to provide the full range, and even down to dispute resolution. We all hope that we're never going to need that, but when we do, it can be as simple as a rental disagreement. It can be that we have an insurance claim and we need some dispute resolution. So at Ogier, we're able to provide that full offering, and so on a daily basis. That's kind of what keeps me busy, working through and servicing the clients and providing that level of service.
And it's a full-time job.
It is. Yeah. It is. I love it.
Well, we've worked together for a client, and I believe you are at the moment for another.
Yep.
And yeah, I've had a fantastic experience with you. Obviously, your knowledge and experience and detail in this industry is paramount. You always want your clients to feel comfortable. And it reflects well when clients are introduced to you. I know that they're in safe hands, right? And that's what happens in a relatively small corporate community. You want to make sure that the clients are well cared for.
And I think that's one of the benefits that we have. When clients
in Cayman,
when clients are coming to Cayman, they're not exactly sure what to expect. But that level of sophistication, and that level of reputational advantage in terms of saying, like you rightly said, I want my clients to feel comfortable. And if they don't, then you're going to be a bit more hesitant to do any referrals after.
Well, and also the word of mouth and reputation and the stress that comes with that as well, right?
Exactly.
What are your clients often surprised by? Is there anything in particular that they're surprised by? Like, does Cayman's law as a jurisdiction change from other jurisdictions?
So, I mean...
Tough question. Forgive me.
I mean, most of our clients are familiar with the common law system of law. And I think what the biggest differentiator for us in Cayman is not necessarily the law, but it's the diversity of the offerings. People aren't necessarily expecting the $15 million home homes right down the chain, right? So we have the diversity, we have the high standards of construction. People are quite concerned when they're coming to the Caribbean. We're in a hurricane belt, and they're concerned about what levels of construction, and when they see the high quality standards that we're.
Well, you have to educate them, but yeah.
Exactly. The other thing I think that is very important is the robustness of our land register system. Right, you're very familiar with that, Mike. But the government guarantee on titles, for example, many of them are coming. They're asking about title insurance. What do they need to worry about?
We don't need it.
We don't need it, right? So that robustness of the system, I think, is, of course, when we're doing registrations and doing transfers, and the detail that they go into sometimes makes it a bit of a pain to get that all completed. But it does allow us to have a very robust system that gives a level of comfort to those that are coming here and looking at making significant investments in Cayman. And there is a risk or a perception of a risk when you're looking at purchasing or making significant investments in the Caribbean. And I think that the robustness allows a level of confidence that they can actually do those investments and feel comfortable.
Well, as we both agree, Cayman is an incredible place. I think even by default, Cayman is an incredible place. But whilst the rest of the world seems to be on fire, if it's not one thing, it's another, right? Cayman is a safe harbor in a stormy world.
Correct.
And but on top of that, just by default alone, but on top of that, we truly are an incredible community, very diverse, educated, and one of the major priorities for a lot of newcomers is the safety that Cayman has to offer.
Completely.
But the professionalism, and we're a first world country that happens to be in a, dare I say, it's a third world region.
Yeah.
And being able to cater to these high net worth individuals, businesses, corporations on the international stage is something that we collectively, your firm, do time and time again. Can you give us an overview of residency by investment in Cayman?
Sure.
Just a general snapshot.
Yeah. I mean, the government, I think it was in 2003, determined that residency by investment was something that they wanted to cater for. I think that a lot of the other Caribbean islands are doing citizenship by investment. Being a British overseas territory, we're not in control over citizenship. That's controlled by the British Nationality Act, and so we have. Sorry
to interrupt, but you can ultimately seek and acquire citizenship through the course of time anyway.
Correct, through the British Nationality Act, like we said, right? Because what we have here is British citizenship. We talk about being Caymanian, but that's a right enshrined in our immigration law. Right. It's not necessarily a citizenship.
This is a hot topic.
It gets a little bit more confusing.
Right.
So we're all British nationals, and so in the offering of residency, we're able to offer two different tiers. One of them being permanent residency, so it's basically unlimited, and the other being a 25-year residence certificate that's renewable. It was mainly designed at that time for retirees who were looking at coming to Cayman for a fixed period of time.
Attracts wealthy individuals that wouldn't be a burden on the state.
Correct. So, both of those give you a right to reside in Cayman. One has a requirement. So the 25-year residency certificate has an investment criteria of 1.2 million US.
Yep.
It gives you a residence certificate for 25 years, and it has the right of renewal for a further 25 years, so for a total of 50 years. Again, if you're a 60-year-old retiree that wants to come, 50 years should be more than enough. And like I said, an investment of 1.2 million US, you need to have a clean police record. You need to show that you have the ability to maintain yourself and your dependents. The rule of thumb for that is usually like 150,000
maintained
in annual income. And then you need to have health insurance, right? So as was mentioned, you don't want to become a burden. We want to make sure that it doesn't become a burden, and health insurance is mandatory in the Cayman Islands.
Yep.
So if you can meet those 4 criteria and you want to reside in Cayman, that's an option available for you. The unlimited residency, the difference is it's actually 2.4 million US. And again, the difference with that one, it's a bit higher from a one-time cost. There's a one-time government fee of 100,000 CI, so 121,000 US. The difference with that one is you can get a variation to allow you to work. because both of these were without the right to work. But with unlimited, you can get a variation. Usually, an individual will come and decide that they want to work in their own company. What we see a lot of is that they retire, they've made their money, they don't want to work, and then they come here, and after a while they get bored and they decide that they want to do something. So you can get a variation. You still have to pay the price for the work permit. But the other significant benefit of the unlimited residence, as we touched on at the beginning, is that you're able to actually, through a period of making Cayman your permanent home, actually qualify for naturalization under the British Nationality
After
Act.
8 years?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
Okay.
So it's 5 years where Cayman is your permanent residence. And so the way that the British Nationality Act determines that is that you can't be outside of the country for more than 90 days.
In any 1 year.
In any 1 year over the 5-year period prior to that application, except for education, medical, or business, right? So if Cayman is actually your primary home, and you have an unlimited right of residence in that jurisdiction, you can then make a application under the British Nationality Act for naturalization and then become a British subject, British citizen. You get a right to a passport. And then after acquiring that, 5 years after that, you can actually make an application for the right to be Caymanian. So that's,
This is a touchy subject for many.
It is.
Cayman's population, I remember my parents came here and the population was like 7,000 people. And I often chat with my dad about this sort of stuff, and he goes, what was it like? And West Bay Road was just a sort of almost a mile track. And then you fast forward to today and we're at 85,000, 82, government will say 79. I don't know, it depends who you talk to.
It's moving real fast.
But it's moving really fast, and that's the point. And is this a case of if we don't grow, we're going to run into trouble? Is this a case of we have to grow? Is this a case of we shouldn't grow? I mean, listen, everyone's going to have a different opinion, and I don't want to pin you down on, put you under the spotlight on that, but I know, and I'll share mine first. If we don't evolve and adapt and grow, then we're going to wither and fall behind. It's part of my general overarching thought on population growth. What is important, however, is sustainability, traffic, right? Public transport, managing and maintaining crime that Cayman has traditionally known as a very safe place, and this is very important for many people coming here. So crime management and control is important, and obviously community is important. I don't know. Share your thoughts. What do you think?
Sure, Mike. Like you say, always a difficult discussion. It's much easier for me to discuss it now that I'm not in a position of making policy.
Yeah, Minister of Tourism is
exactly. It's one of those things that you struggle to get the balance right. But I think I share, if not all, the majority of your views on the concerns. I think that Cayman, the immigration system, as much as there are challenges, I think it served Cayman quite well. Mm-hmm. I think that it's important for us when we do comparisons to the rest of the jurisdictions in our region to recognize that while some of them may have more protectionist measures, where a few of them are living a standard of living that Cayman has, and that I think if we're being fair, immigration has played a large part in that.
Yeah.
The fact that we're able to provide and play in the financial services arena at the level of the big players in the world. We would like to say that that was all internal driven, but the truth of the matter is we were able to attract the best and the brightest in our areas of expertise from around the world. Yeah. And when we look at the culinary offerings we have, it's great when we talk about our culture and our local foods, but when we're seen as being the culinary capital of the Caribbean, a lot of that is because, again, we're bringing the best and the brightest from around the world. And so when we look at the expertise and the offering in our health services,
it's incredible.
It's the same, right? So I think it's a well-recognized fact for those that are going to be honest that our immigration policies, the ability of being able to have the high standard of services that we've had and that we have the benefit of is because of our welcoming immigration regime and system that is in place. What I do think is necessary when you talk about those numbers, the population growth, I do think that there is some manpower planning and studying required that will allow us to hopefully reach a balance. Sustainability. So when we get into that critical mass, right, are we at the stage where we still need the same systems in place that have been in place for the last 30 or 40 years and that has benefited? Because, there's always getting to that space that when you peak, you want to stay at the top, right? You want to necessarily not get into that sharp drops that we see, the peaks and the valleys that we get into in trends. And so in an ideal world, what we would do is just at the perfect time, we would have laws amended and changed that would make sure that our systems are sustainable. Now, we know that we don't live in a perfect world, and we know that
it's forever, ever changing. And so I think that where we are now is the challenges that you've identified, traffic, the sustainability, the crime, safety and security. When we see the wait list for the schools, and we look at continuing to build roads, and when we look at the landfill and the fact that we can't get that under control, I do think that we have reached a space, and the policymakers of the country are going to have to decide what we're going to do to actually bring that in line, but taking into account the fact that we are a international financial services jurisdiction. We've created an expectation and a demand for certain services, and we need to be able to continue to provide those services if we want to stay and maintain the level of, the high standard of living that we've become accustomed to. And so I think that there is a time for an assessment. I think we've gotten to the stage where we now have to determine whether, like I said, those policies that have worked well for us are still going to continue to work well. They're still current and valid and
correct,
relevant.
And that's what I expect to happen. I think that our government.
Well, that's an interesting point. The 2.4 million permanent residency threshold in existing property investment was initially designed to bring in high net worth individuals, retirees generally, that weren't going to be a burden on the state, et cetera, et cetera. But what we have found has been happening is that younger individuals are coming to the island. Instead of buying one $2.4 million US or higher property, they're buying $500,000, which has just exacerbated the housing issue,
correct,
housing affordability, which obviously, and this is why we started Property Cayman Cares, is to try and play our part in trying to help getting Caymanians onto the ladder and play a role, at least from that perspective. I went off tangent there, but or off topic. Is there a chance that government will do one of two things, or maybe both? And what are your thoughts on this? Increasing that 2.4 million threshold to say 3 million and requiring it to be all in one property.
So, Mike, I think that was a loophole. I think that is a easy fix. I think the combination of properties would definitely be a benefit. I don't think the intention at the time was expecting, and I do think that, in answer to your question, both of those should be considered for government. I think the 2.4 million from 2003, you would be able to better tell me. But how those in 2003, $2.4 million was a lot of money. You wouldn't have a lot of people coming.
Yeah.
I think I've seen some stats that in 2015 there were 5. It might have been a discussion with you. There was 5 properties that were above the $5 million range or something.
And now
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that
inflation alone should shift that number.
Correct. I think that number definitely needs to be shifted.
Well, you nailed it when you said that government needs to consider, and I'm sure they are considering adapting and evolving with the current and relevant situation. And I don't throw out that should they do it. Again, it's for the policymakers to debate and consider that as an option, but also to tap into the professionals in the respective industries, your industry and my industry as well, to see how that would impact the flow of incoming population growth. You don't want to suddenly do something so knee-jerk that's going to stop an abrupt jolt to what has been generally working pretty well.
Yeah.
You don't want to suddenly close the gates entirely. and what that impact would be if we were to suddenly raise it that high, or perhaps there should be a period of time where in 12 months time it's going to go up to 2.6 and then 2.9 and then 3.1 or what have you. I don't know.
But Mike, I think again, you're one of the experts in the field. Again, we have a significant amount of expertise in real estate.
As long as government consults the professionals.
As long as government consults. And I do believe from my information, I don't think an adjustment would be detrimental. I don't think just because of that period of time, like you said, in inflationary costs. And what we're finding is that we're not getting a lot of our clients coming in at that minimum number, the 2.4.
They're actually signing at 5 or 10, right?
5 or 10, right? So the truth of the matter is I don't really think that adjustment, I think government has some leeway where they could move that number without creating too much uncertainty, too much disruption in that space.
No, it's an interesting one. Okay, you are uniquely positioned as the previous Minister of Tourism to represent Cayman in the corporate world. How do you position yourself with clients today?
So just to be clear, not the previous one, quite a while back.
Not the most recent.
Correct, 2013. One of the previous ministers.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it gives me a unique perspective in terms of looking at, and also, we were the government that actually introduced the residency by investment in 2003.
Brilliant.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that whole concept and consideration at that time, one of the challenges that I've found with being involved in the legal industry is the interpretation of the laws and going back to looking at the intent of the policymakers at that point. So this gives me a unique perspective because I happen to have been one of the policymakers at that time. So I
you know exactly what
I know what the intent was.
Right.
And I can say very clearly that in 2003, the world was a different place. We didn't have the level of citizenship by investment programs that we're seeing now, where you're actually going out and trying to attract people. People are moving from their current places of residence and places of citizens for a range of reasons. And so at that stage, what we were doing, if you would remember, Mike, we were looking at changing the immigration law. We had just gone through a process of Cayman status grants after a moratorium for a long period of time. And we were putting in place a system that had a rollover policy in place. And there was an intention to try to deal with individuals who had made significant investments in Cayman, many of them in condos, and who were now going to be faced with some uncertainty. And so this was an opportunity really to deal with people who had already made investment and commitment to Cayman, but to give them some security of tenure. Give them some security of tenure. Now, as time has progressed, this has now become an attractive option for people who are coming. I just say that to put into context. I mean, one of the challenges that we see with the current system, as well as it's been working, is that when someone is considering making the move to Cayman and looking for residency, they are required, and this becomes a bit of a challenge for both me and you, that says we have to get them convinced that you're going to come and you're going to buy a property and you're going to spend that $4 or $5 or $10 million. And they say, well, what security do I have? And we say, well, if you make that investment, then we can make an application for you, right? Because the law requires them to make that investment before they're even considered, before they can actually make an application. And so that's a bit of a big ask. I'm saying to you, come and invest your $10 million and then we'll do an application and see whether you can get residence or not. But if you think back again, making the point in 2003, we were talking about people who had already made that investment. And so it wasn't an issue. We weren't trying to attract people. We were saying, you've already made your purchase, you've decided, but you know what? Now that you've made such a commitment to Cayman, here's an opportunity for you to get residency. We've never really moved that model, right? And so the law still requires. And so, as I'm sure you have had, we now have to convince them and say, but there's a real good chance if you do all these things and if you can meet this criteria. And they say, well, what happens if after I do all of this, I'm not allowed to stay in my home for any more than 6 months?
Or the policy and the laws change.
Or the policy and the laws change. So we haven't touched on the attractiveness of the jurisdiction based on the stable government, the fact that we have a reasonable government. We haven't seen anything from a ridiculous standpoint that would shake the confidence of those people who are coming here, because it's important for us to remember that those properties that are being built, especially those on 7 Mile Beach, that are going to be 6, 8, 10, $30 million.
42.
42. Those aren't necessarily going to be people from Cayman, right? You know, that market is going to be someone who we have to convince that they're going to want to come here. They're going to love it here. They're going to want to raise their family. They're going to be given the opportunity to come. Otherwise, those properties are going to be left vacant, right? And we're going to see a dip in the market, and we're going to see a dip in the valuation that we have on those properties that we are so proud of.
Yeah.
Right? So it's important to recognize that it's a constant work in progress. We constantly have to continue to do all the things that we've been doing, understanding that there's a balance. It's important to remember that there's a quota on the number of residences that can be offered through this program.
Yep.
It's 250 per year.
How close have we got to that?
My information says that we've never got to the point of having to adjust that. Again, it was put in place in 2003. There was an expectation
different
that
time.
we were going to have to limit the number, but I think so far that we've always been under the 250.
Yeah.
And so again,
That seems sustainable.
it's a manageable number.
Yeah.
It's a manageable number if we consider that those people are not allowed to come here and work, so they're not competing with jobs.
Yeah.
And they're not competing for houses in the market that Caymanians are actually competing for, right?
Yeah.
So definitely a challenge. The housing market is a challenge, but the people that are coming here for residence by investment are forced, except for the instance that you said, right? And I think that's a loophole that government has to do, right? Except for those instances where people are looking and saying, not even 5, I'm going to buy 2 properties at 1.2. I'm going to rent one of those and I'm going to live in the other one and I'm going to qualify. All right. I don't think that is something that we should be entertaining. I think, like I said, that's something that needs to be addressed, and the combination of properties. I'm sure there's rare occasions where
It's come up a lot. I've heard this talk. I don't want to sort of be the one to plant that seed out there for everyone. But it is a loophole that has been taken advantage of. And yeah, in fact, that's a nice segue. I was asked to speak to the Youth Parliament.
Yeah. Remember?
Because the debate was, should we restrict foreigners investing in the Cayman Islands? This is the Youth Parliament, but it's proper opposite sides of the bench, you know, and I had the honor of having your son. He's a youth. Is he going to follow your footsteps?
No, not at all. He's not even going into law. He went into accounting. He's in university doing accounting.
Good boy.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed me. He's a bright boy, and I very much enjoyed that. But what was interesting was, first of all, I was touched that I was asked, because I was once a young Caymanian, and I like to think I'm still a young Caymanian.
Yep.
But I really understand that debate. And it was determined at the end of the Youth Parliament debate that it was not a good idea to restrict foreigners investing in the Cayman Islands, because that is part of the, and you touched on it earlier, it brings that culture and it brings that diversity and it brings, can I say fresh air? I don't want to say it like that, but it brings an element of the latest in technology and healthcare and culinary and financial, and the tech industry is really, really thriving. So what are your thoughts on where Cayman's going?
So,
tough question.
Yeah, I mean, you're known for tough questions, Mike. So
Am I?
it's I think Cayman is poised to continue on its path to success. I think that, you know, we're blessed to be living in a jurisdiction that, you know, we have the safety, the security, you know, the sun, sea, and sand that people, you know, all those S's, right? And the one that I think actually separates us more so from a lot of the other jurisdictions is sophistication, right? I think that, especially in this market space that we're talking about, the, you know, informed, prudent, successful business person that has decided that Cayman, or they're looking for moving from their current residency or place of citizenship, I think they require a certain amount of sophistication that you don't traditionally get in the Caribbean, right? So whether whether it's the systems that we talked about, the lands and survey system, the sophistication and the robustness in that system to give the certainty, whether it's the service providers, the law firms, the accounting firms, the real estate companies that they're looking for. People still see the Caribbean as being the Caribbean in general, but the experience that you have when you're looking at doing business in the Caribbean can be quite diverse in its range of service offerings. I think the sophistication demanded by our financial services industry, for example, has come across into all the other areas of service. And so just like how you can expect if you're doing a financial service transaction that it's going to be at the same level of London or New York or any of the other onshore jurisdictions, and it is. I think the same happens when you're looking at the other level of services. And so, like they said, a rising tide raises all ships, and I think Cayman offers a level of sophistication. If we talk about the radio service, the radio stations in Cayman, and I use that in jest because we happen to be sitting in a studio, but I would dare suggest that the levels are going to be higher than what you will find in other jurisdictions. And so based on that, those individuals that are coming here with certain expectations are able to have those expectations met. And I think that bodes well for the continued success of Cayman.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's this, we are a all-roundedness, an incredible place. Not the most beautiful, not the largest. We don't have lush jungles. We don't have, rivers. I don't know, where do you stop? But we have everything. We have everything. And I've mentioned it before, this the security, the safety, the stable government, the racial harmony, the police don't carry guns, the culinary, the education, and the healthcare. Healthcare. Huge.
Yeah, agreed.
It's incredible. And of course, we're always going to say lots of nice things about Cayman.
Of course.
But we've had the opportunity and privilege to be able to travel to different places around the world. And I'm sure I certainly asked myself this question. Could I raise a family here? Could I invest here? Could I adapt to the culture, the language, the people, the culinary, is it safe? Do I have security for my family, healthcare? And Cayman always comes out winning.
That's right. Like I said, it's not all things to all people, right?
No,
I say to people,
absolutely.
If you're into yachting, for example, you may find the offering in the Eastern Caribbean or the Windward Islands to be more attractive.
Island hopping,
right? Because you can do island hopping. You can, Cayman isn't necessarily going to be the best place if you're into that. But what you tend to find is that you might want to do that for 1 year or 2 years, or you might you want a little escape to do that. But when it actually comes to the place where you want to live and raise your kids, after you get tired and you've seen all the other islands, you're going to decide that Cayman is going to probably be the place.
Do you know what I often, sorry to interrupt, I love hearing you always really hear of people moving from Bermuda to Cayman.
Correct.
Or from BVI to Cayman. Yeah. You never hear it the other way around, right?
Exactly.
And that says a lot. Says a lot.
Like I said, those beautiful islands, if you want the topography, if you want to get those views and vistas that you're going to get in some of those other islands who have the elevation, and like I said, if you want the marinas and you want to be able to do the island hopping, Cayman isn't going to compete well in those spaces. But when you're coming to the safety, security, the healthcare,
your priorities of your decision need to be
the education for your kids, to be the accessibility to North America if your kids are in school, right? You're right. Cayman is going to pretty much excel in those areas.
Development, Cline.
Yeah.
So I've had let me put a little bit of preface here. I've had a lot more interest in the Eastern districts.
Yep.
People that have been coming to Cayman and or investing in Cayman for many years have got a little bit fed up with the Miami Beach aspect.
Yep.
Tall buildings that are likely to just get taller because so that's not necessarily a bad thing, because now there's a little bit more economic activity going out to the other districts.
Yep.
North Side, East End, Frank Sound. Development. So where do you draw the line? I mean, can Cayman, do we want to have 15, 20-story, 30-story buildings in Cayman?
So, Mike, I think that, we've seen a growth, right? We've seen a growth. We were at 3 stories before. And
it was the tops of the trees. That was the law, right?
Correct.
They could never be taller than the trees.
And so we went to 5, and then we went to 7, and now we're at 10. My personal position is that when we talk about views and perspective, anything taller than a 1-story or 2-story building, I can't see through it or I can't see over it anyway, right? So I'm not going to get views of the beach.
Right.
But I understand just the perception and the feel and, trying to keep some sense of, like I said, not being Miami Beach. And so
Yeah.
I think what Cayman offers is what you're finding is that, if I had to choose a place that was the best place to live in Cayman, and we do, our clients are going to ask us, where should I be looking? And so if you want that hustle and bustle, and if you want to be close to the center of activity, then I will say 7 Mile Beach Corridor, into West Bay. Road system infrastructure is such that you're not going to have major traffic delays or traffic concerns. If you
Access to all entertainment.
If you have kids that are in school, then that's where you're going to need to be. But if you want to get out and you don't want to be in that hustle and bustle and you want a bit more of the serenity, the peacefulness, the privacy, then Cayman has an offering like you rightly found in the eastern districts. And if you want those estate style properties where you're looking for an acre plus of land, then that's where you need to be looking, right? And so I think that Cayman continues to offer a level of diversity that can cater to pretty much whatever your needs are. But I do think that, when we talk about development, our infrastructure needs to keep up, right? So when we talk about East-West Arterial, when I hear people who want to live on that side, but they have kids, and they're going to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours in traffic in the morning, that's not an experience that is going to be,
no.
A
You just come
one.
from that, from New York, from London,
Exactly.
from Toronto, wherever you come from.
So while East End and the eastern end of the island is going to offer you that, I do think that we need to, first of all, try to address those challenges that we're currently facing, and then try to put some protection in place that we don't end up doing. Because when we develop and when we open new roads, the tendency is that we just kind of do the same thing that we did before, right?
Yeah.
So
Adapting, evolving, changing.
and maintaining and ensuring that we're able to have that sustainability that you mentioned earlier.
And not sacrificing who we are and where we've come from and what we are and our individuality from a cultural standpoint.
Correct. And I think that culturally, I think that the majority of Cayman would have accepted that we probably are going to end up with higher buildings. I think that based on the limitation of the property that we have, the size, the 100 square miles that we have, I think that going in the area is probably going to be smarter than trying to spread out, right? We look at one of the criticisms of the schools when we look at the school campus. It's a sprawling campus, and people have said, well, why haven't you built that in one multi-story building like they do in other parts of the world, instead of having, 5, 6, 10 acres of land used up for that space, and then having to worry about children moving through the rain and all the other issues that go along with that. So I think we're going to see more concentration. I do hope that we're able to get some sort of balance where we restrict the ability to do that. I've heard proposals where they say, well, if you can meet the setback requirements, we'll allow you to go higher, right? And so we know it's a staggered system. So the higher you go, basically, the further you need to step it back. With our roads, our current road system, at least the prime properties in 7 Mile Beach, there's not going to be a lot of properties that are going to be able to meet those current requirements.
They have to go taller.
So, I do think that, when we hear those challenges for beach access, if you're able to actually put higher buildings but provide more beach access, I think that might be a trade-off that the Caymanian people will appreciate. But I mean, those are discussions and decisions, obviously, for
hot topics. And I know setbacks, being obviously the beach erosion issues when,
of course,
when stuff has been. I remember, gosh, I won't name the hotel, but that southern end of the beach, the wall.
Yep.
It was
correct
in front of everybody else. And even back then, I was 15, 16 years old, whatever. I was like, even I recognized, like, that's not a good thing, right?
Not a good thing.
And of course, here we are, and it's not a good thing.
No, history
and it's impacted others.
Of course, and so now we're suffering for those mistakes that were made at that time. And
is there going to be a beach replenishment? There's been talk.
There has been.
a few things have to happen. Setbacks, knock down walls, seawalls that are exacerbating the problem, and also putting in some, not necessarily a groin system, but some sort of slow down the beach so that it doesn't wash away. And Billy Adam, right? Interesting fella. He does a lot of his research, but he says, no, we don't need to put out groins off the beach. You want to go parallel to the beach because it stops, it slows it down, and actually the beach grows. I just hope that government are indeed looking into all opportunities, and it can't be just one fix. It's got to be a series of things, right?
And I think, Mike, that's where I think that's one of the other things that Cayman is blessed with, right? So it's blessed with those individuals. You mentioned Billy Adams, right? Interesting character.
Yeah, absolutely. Pushes the envelope.
Pushes the envelope. But the one thing that you can't question is his interest and his commitment.
And passion.
Right?
Okay, man.
And so at the end of the day, whatever he says, whether you like what he says or whether you don't, what you can't challenge is that he's doing that because of not a self-interest, but a national interest, right?
For the long term.
For the long term. And so, being a member of parliament, we've had our discussions and our differences and at that time, but there was always a respect for those individuals like himself who were willing to stand for what he is passionate about and what he believes in. And so I think that, again, that's a blessing for Cayman, having those people that are going to
sincerely invested in and passionate.
Correct. Hold you accountable.
Exactly. Okay, this has been a complete honor, a privilege. I'm really, really grateful for your time and the insight and sharing your thoughts and opinions. Cline, thank you very much. I've got 3 or 4 or 5 rapid fire questions here.
Let's go.
All right, the first one's an easy one. Local shout out. Do you have a particular individual, a group, a company, a service you've received that?
I think if I had to, and maybe just because of the space that I'm in, I would say the immigration department, right? The challenges that they face
they're peppered, aren't they?
Are peppered,
yeah.
Right? I mean, they can never get it right, They can do their best, they'll never get it right. But overall, like we mentioned, the value that immigration plays, the importance that immigration plays, not just in Cayman, but everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Especially for those countries that are doing it right, where people actually want to come to, and they want to live there, and they want to stay longer, and they want an opportunity to make a living there. The immigration system, the immigration department, the leaders and the policymakers at that, they deserve to be thanked because we.
Good, excellent, deservedly so.
Yep.
The second is a little controversial.
Okay.
Brace for impact. You're used to these sorts of tough questions. You said earlier that I asked tough questions. What is the best area to live in Cayman? Tough question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it. I think that, again, if a client comes to...
you, Cline. What's your personal opinion, the best place?
My best place is if you're coming and you want to be in the mix of things and you want the benefit of the culinary experience. And,
it depends.
Then 7 Mile Beach is going to be, that corridor is going to be the place that you're going to need to be. But if you want that privacy and you want a bit more serenity, if you want a bit more of the laid-back island life, then I don't think that,
And where is your happy place?
I'm
a fishing boat.
I live in West Bay. I'm quite happy. Comfortable. It's family. I'm surrounded by family.
Yes, of course.
And it's one of those places that.
And property values have gone up.
They have, and they continue to be demands. We go through the same struggles, looking at getting property for your kids and grandkids now, and ensuring that they're going to be able to enjoy that life and that legacy that we have, So definitely a mix. I think the important takeaway from that, Mike, is that Cayman has something to offer for pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
And so really depending on what you want, you can find.
I agree. We are able to cater to all walks.
Yep.
This is slightly controversial, but not so bad. To see how you answer. Best place for sundowners on the island?
No, 7 Mile Beach.
7 Mile Beach?
Yeah, I mean,
golden sunsets.
Golden sunsets. You can't
beat it.
Green flash. The whole bit.
You ever seen a green flash?
I have.
I think I have as well. I have.
I have. It's a bit of a controversy.
It's that moment where the sun comes right through the very horizon at the angle of your height, however you are, and that flash. It's probably because you've been staring at the sun for the last 5 minutes, waiting for it to go through. But
we both
more
have
of a purple flash.
We both have seen what we think is the green flash.
I'm convinced I've seen it.
Me too. Me too.
And this is a little deep. What do you love most about Cayman? And be as honest, authentic, real, transparent as possible. What do you love most about Cayman? What's that one thing?
undoubtedly the people, right? So I think that Cayman is, having traveled quite a bit to the Caribbean. I love the Caribbean. I love the Caribbean people, but I think that Caymanian people have a difference. I think that while I would like to say that it was some planned, engineered process, I think that a part of our process and our development as a people that has made us as unique and as special as we are is the fact that, you know, in the early days, Cayman was pretty much bare, basic, nothing here.
Fishing village.
Fishing village.
Just like the rest of them.
Well, a lot of the others had had issues, right? So some would have had sugarcane, some would have had plantains, and they would have had exports, and then they would have had these large slave plantations, and so.
But we had turtles and rope.
So, but
okay, yeah, depends how far back you go.
Depends how far back you go. So what we end up seeing in some of the other jurisdictions, there's a bit of a resentment from immigrants, because in most places those people came and they didn't necessarily do well for them, and so they took away from what they had. In those days, people weren't coming to Cayman. What we found is that our forefathers had to leave Cayman. To make a living, the majority of them had to leave and go elsewhere. And so they had to be welcomed in other places to be able to make a living and to be able to do for their families elsewhere. So someone had to welcome them in another location, in another place to do. And so I think, you know, and again, this is just my assessment as to when we talk about Cayman kind and we talk about what makes Cayman more welcome, and we talk about the diverse cultures and the mix that we have and the seamless transition and mix that we have with the different diversities, the different cultures that are there, I think it may have something to do with the fact that we're cognizant of
those that looked after us.
Those that looked after us when Cayman wasn't necessarily the place that it is today, and when we had to go elsewhere to make a living. And so we're much more prone to welcome those people that are now coming here and choosing Cayman as a place, right? And so I think
we're all ambassadors to any newcomers, whether we're off island and talk about Cayman, or if we're welcome, be kind to a tourist, right? Exactly. Because you want them to have a good, positive experience.
So from a favorite thing about Cayman is definitely people, the uniqueness of that. You know, I take pride in hearing those experiences when people come here for the first time and they talk about, you know, well, Cayman kind is a real thing. You know, it's not just a tagline. It's people that are really, and I see those. I
see people signing off their emails, Cayman kind regards.
Correct.
I love it. Correct. It's fantastic. And Cayman, I agree with you 100%. It's the people, the community, just the warmth. Yeah. There's a collective. I remember, gosh, I think it was the Red Cross, Cayman Islands, was categorized as the highest earning per capita Red Cross in the International Red Cross Network in the world. This was several years ago. And that's just, you know, that's people coming together for a common cause. It's a beautiful thing.
It is beautiful, Mike. And you know, dealing with people from around the world on a daily basis, you hear these you know, little measurements, these little tinkerings as to what it means.
Yeah.
They're sitting waiting for you a little while ago, and I was speaking to Mike.
Yeah.
And he gave me, like, again, just off the cuff, he said to me that he's not from Cayman, but when he thinks about Cayman, what he thinks about is that the people that are going to be pallbearers at his funeral, they're going to be his, you know, ride and die Caymanians, right? So the people
that's beautiful.
Exactly. So the people that mean the most to him, the people that he wants basically to take him out of this world, right, are those people that he's met and become friends with in Cayman, right? Yeah. And that's from someone who, I think he said he was Corpus Christi, Texas or something, right? But
that's interesting.
That's what he's found in Cayman. And so
and long may that last and continue.
To me, that's pretty much that pretty much sums up what makes the people of Cayman special. The fact that you can find that.
One world.
One world.
Right? One people. Yeah. We're in this together. Yeah. And Cayman's an incredible place, as we know, in our unbiased opinion.
Yeah, of course, totally.
But yeah, listen, let's leave it with that. Thank you so much, Cline. I really appreciate your insight and everything.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
again, these opportunities to discuss something that we're both passionate
Yeah.
and love.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Good man. Thank
Thanks
you very
again
much.
for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.